Hi everybody, welcome to section 8.7a, factoring trinomials. Notice the title of this section. It is factoring trinomials. Does everybody see a trinomial? So we've got an ax squared, so something x squared plus bx plus c. Notice it's in standard form. Our highest exponent first, no exponents last. That's why we talked about that earlier and wanted you to put that into descending order or standard form. So, first of all, there we go. We have got three different ways that you may understand factoring trinomials. I'm going to tell you to pick the one that makes the most sense to you. So today in 8.7a, we're going to talk about two options. And then in 8.7b, we're going to try one more. We're going to solve equations at some point, but let's just worry about the factoring part first. So please notice this example down here, 2x squared plus 5x plus 3. We're going to use that. So our first option is to guess and check. This is the old school way. This is how I learned how to factor trinomials. And it works, and a lot of people like this way. So if you understand it, do it. So when you guess and check, remember when we're factoring, we're putting parentheses into a problem. Our answer for a trinomial is going to be two binomials in parentheses. So your first step when you're using this option to factor a trinomial is to write your two parentheses. We're going to put our answers inside there. Step 2, and I'm going to go through this. Break down your first term. So why don't I do this over here on the side? Write my two parentheses. I'm going to leave room for a binomial in both. Break down my first term. So my first term is 2x to the second. Think opposite of foiling, right? The last section 8.5, we thought opposite of distributive property. We could use distributive property to check. Here we can use FOIL or the line method to check. So what will multiply together that will go in the first places in each answer binomial to what will multiply to 2x to the second power? Well, the 2 is going to have to be a 2 times 1. The x squared, you're going to split them up into an x times x. So I've got a 2x and a 1x. Do I even have to write that one? I could just say x, right? 2x and an x. Multiply them together, I get 2x squared. Then we skip over and we're going to break down our last term. Well, our last term is 3, positive 3. I should move that over so we make sure it's positive. So when I say break down, I'm thinking of factors. What multiplies to give us a 3? In case you're not thinking it, 3 is a prime number, and the only factors of 3 are 3 and 1. We just have to decide where we're going to put the 3 and 1. Now it's going to go in the second spot in each parenthesis. Well, let's just give it a try, and let's try the 3 times the 1. Now here's the thing. I didn't put any signs in there. We are going to test the outsides and the insides to see if we get the middle term, which happens to be 5x. So when we test the insides and the outsides, that means that I am going to be, why don't I do this first? Use FOIL or distributive property, which is what I was just going to say, and watch out for your signs. I don't have any signs in those parentheses yet. I'm going to have to add them. It's going to be a 2x plus 3 or a 2x minus 3. It's going to be an x plus 1 or an x minus 1 if my test works. So when I say test, we know that when we do this, we've got a 2x squared. But when we do this, 2x times 1 is 2x, right? 3 times 1x is 3x. Do those add up properly? Oh, I should have made it so they didn't. They do, right? 2x plus 3x is a positive 5x. I'm going to put a positive and a positive. I really should have put a positive and positive in there because 3 times 1, positive 3 times positive 1 gives us that positive 3 for our last term. So positive 2x plus 3x gives us 5x. And we know that this one will work because 3 times 1, that's what we did. So we've got ourselves a factored answer. 2x plus 3 and 1x plus 1. All of your answers will look like that. Two binomials inside parentheses. Remember, the parentheses tell you you have factored. We'll do some more practice with this. If you like guess and check, please use it. It's up to you. You could also use a product sum table. This is the way that always works no matter how big the numbers are, no matter what happens. So when we make a product sum table, product means multiply, sum means add, our goal is to break up a trinomial into 4 terms from our original 3. So that we can factor by grouping. 4 terms is what we did in lesson 8.5b, right? 8.5b, we had 4 terms. So we can factor by grouping. So when we make a product sum table, notice how this is a trinomial. Notice how, if I go to this part over here, do you see a pair of like terms? I broke up that 17x into a 2x plus a 15x. Well, 2x plus 15x adds up to 17x. So I had to know how to break that apart instead of combining. Our product sum table will tell us how to break them apart. All right, so let's go through the steps and then we'll do some factoring with it. So to factor a trinomial, I put ax squared plus bx plus c up here because we're going to refer to those a's, b's, and c's. So the first thing you need to do is make a product sum table. When I make a product sum table, I do this. Multiplies to a times c and adds to b. So a times c is your number out in front of your x squared times the number that is by itself. We want to know what will multiply to that, but add to that middle term. In that last example, it was 17. Then we break up our middle term into 2 pieces using our answers from that table. So we got to do a little bit of work on that blue, multiply to a times c and add to b. Then we're going to factor by grouping. This is just like 8.5b. Group them into 2 parentheses, do 2 GCF problems, and if you do everything right, you will have matching parentheses. If you don't do something right, your parentheses will not match, and you got to go back and take another look. So I've got this trinomial down here, 2x squared plus 5x plus 3. So my first question is, what is a, b, and c? A is always the number in front of the x squared, so would you agree that 2 is a? B is always the number in front of the x term, so I'm going to say b equals 5. Notice how I'm not saying 5x, I'm just saying 5. C is the easiest of the bunch because c is the number that's floating by itself when we've got it in standard form or not, so c must be 3. So if we're going to make a product sum table, and I'm looking for what multiplies to a times c, well, a is 2, c is 3, so we're looking for a number that multiplies to 6 and adds up to our b value, which would be 5. Can you think of a pair of numbers that multiply to 6 but add to 5? Well, I'm going to try one. 6 times 1, right? That multiplies to 6. I'm good. However, when I go over here and do 6 plus 1, that is not equal to 5. So I know that one doesn't work. What's another pair of numbers that multiplies to 6? 2 times 3. When you do this, we always put the product first because that's the first thing you should think about. Worry about if it adds up correctly after. So, 2 plus 3 will definitely give us that 5 that we were looking for. So we know that we are going to break the middle term b into the 2 pieces using the answer from our table. So 2 plus 3 equals 5. I'm going to put x's on them. Don't forget, I'm going to add a little thing here. Put variables on these. So I'm going to take a 2x and a 3x. That's my answer from my product sum table. I'm going to scooch up. So if I move these guys over, if I try to move them over, there we go. So this 5x, I'm going to break up into a 2x plus a 3x. That's my answer over here from my product sum table when I put x's on them. I'm going to bring down my plus 3. I'm going to bring down my 2x squared. And that was a positive 2x plus 3x. I didn't really change anything, right? If I combine like terms, I'd still be back to my original problem. But now that I've broken the middle term into two pieces, step 2, now I'm going to go back to section 8.5b and factor by grouping. So 2 and 2. So I'm going to put parentheses around this half, parentheses around that half. I'm going to put a little shade here so I don't even get distracted by the other side. What is the greatest common factor for a 2x squared plus 2x? Definitely a 2, and one pair of x's I could circle, which means inside my parentheses, I'm going to have an x plus 1. Knowing how to factor 2 is really important in order to factor 3. So over here, and if you need to make a prime factorization, whatever works for you. So over here, I've got a 3x plus 3. What's the GCF for 3x plus 3? Positive 3, right? Always put a sign in there. That's really important. And when I divide or think distributive property or leftovers from prime factorization, I'm believing that I should have an x plus 1. So now I am going to look at what I've got. I just did 2 GCF problems, and now I need to make sure, do I have matching parentheses? I do, right? X plus 1. Remember how our x plus 1s become one parenthesis of my answer, and my GCFs, 2x plus 3, become the other half of my answer. It just so happens, if you look back at the top when we just did guess and check, we got the same answer, 2x plus 3 and x plus 1. Right? If this works for you, a lot of people like this option 2, the product sum table. If you like it, use it. We could go back. Remember, there's always a built-in double check with these problems. If I did the FOIL method, I could double check to make sure after I multiply and combine like terms, I end up with that original problem. So let's do a couple examples. Example number 1. I got a nice large number here. That's all right. Actually, let's do 2. 2x squared minus 3x minus 2. So problem number 2. You could do guess and check. You could do a product sum table. I'm going to do a product sum table on this one. And maybe we'll do guess and check for the next one. How about that? So product sum table, that means I'm going to make a table multiplies to a times c and adds to b. Well, what is a, b, and c in this problem? I'm identifying these now, whether you like guess and check or not, or product sum, because we're going to use a, b, and c a lot as we get more into quadratics. So would you agree that a is 2? B, watch the sign. What's my number out in front of my x term? Negative 3. Remember, I'm not putting any x's or x squares on these. And my c value? Negative 2. The signs are important. So what is a times c, or 2 times negative 2? I'm looking for something that multiplies to negative 4 and adds to negative 3. So my first thought is always negative 2 times 2, right? Will that add up correctly? Negative 2 plus 2 equals 0, not what we're looking for. What else multiplies to negative 4? How about 4 times negative 1? Well, 4 plus negative 1 is 3. So we're so close, it needs to add up to negative 3. So what could I do to make this add up to negative 3 instead of positive 3? Negative 4 times a positive 1. So negative 4 plus 1 equals negative 3. So I know that I have got my correct product sum table numbers. So now I'm going to stick x's on them, because I'm going to go up here and I'm going to break this negative 3x into a negative 4x plus 1x, bring down my minus 2, and bring down my 2x squared. Again, I can double check and make sure I broke that up correctly because -4 plus 1 is -3. Once I've got 4 terms, what are we going to do to solve or to keep factoring this? Right, group them 2 and 2. So what's the greatest common factor for a 2x squared and -4x? Hit pause if you need to stop and think about that, but I'm going to say it's a 2x. My leftovers, or if I think distributive property or division, I should have an x minus 2 left in my parentheses. Double check, make sure you did your distributive property right. On this side, I've got an x minus 2. This is a trick problem because GCF, there's nothing bigger than a 1. Don't answer the phone. But if I divide everything by 1, I've still got a 1x minus 2, and I could write 1x or just a plain x. And my work is done. Now, last thing I want to check, do I have matching parentheses? Hallelujah. We know our answer is going to be 2 binomials in parentheses. What's inside one of those binomials? What's inside the other set of binomials? Does it matter which order your 2 factors are? We could switch those guys. You could have x minus 2 written first. You could have x minus 2 written second. It doesn't matter. Okay. Let's do the next one, guess and check. If you don't like guess and check, if you don't think that's going to work for you and you want to do a product sum table, go ahead and do that. But let's skip down here to problem number 4. 2x squared plus 15x plus 18. Well, guess and check might be a lot of work, right? Because when I think about an 18, holy smokes, that could be 3 times 6 or 9 times 2 or 18 times 1. That's a lot of work. Let's give it a whirl. So guess and check, I'm going to do 2 sets of parentheses. I'm going to take my first and break it down. What 2 things will multiply to 2x to the second? You've only got one option here. 2x times x. We know we're good there. As we're guessing and checking, we might have to make some changes to this. What numbers will multiply to a positive 18? You want to try 9 times 2? You have to decide where you're going to put the 9 and 2. You may have to switch them before you get the right answer, or you might have to change numbers. So if I'm going to start with 9 and 2, I start with 9 and 2, and then I switch it to 2 and 9. So keep that in mind. And I'm thinking they're both positives. We can deal with that after. So now we're going to check. We know that our first and our last will work. So we need to do this one. 2x times 9 is 18x. 2 times x is a positive 2x. Well, 18x plus 2x is 20x. And what are we looking for our middle term? 15, right? So that does not work. So 2 and 9 does not work. So I'm going to take all this. I'm going to erase if I've got a pencil, or I'm going to just slide things around if I don't. So maybe I should try my 9 and 2 instead of 2 and 9. So this time, 2x times 2 is 4x. 9 times x is 9x. 9x plus 4x, will that give us the 15x in the middle we're looking for? That's a big 13, right? So that's not going to work either. So 9 and 2 is out. 2, 9, 9, 2, it's out. So I'm going to put those over on the side. Those are junk. So what's another pair of numbers that will multiply to 18? 6 times 3. So we know our first and our last are good. That is the good part about this. So what's 2x times 3? And 6 times x? We're getting kind of closer. 6x plus 6x, that's 12x. That still doesn't work because we still want to get a 15x in the middle. So 6 and 3 doesn't work. So now I'm going to try to switch these guys. Some people like guess and check. Other people find this to be too tedious. So we could do this with the product sum or get it started. So we know that that one doesn't work. So let's do this. 6 times 2x is 12x. 3 times x is 3x. Do we finally have our center 15x that we're looking for? Whew, finally. So we know our final answer will be 2x plus 3 and x plus 6. You see how guess and check gets a bit tedious. If you were doing a product sum table, you'd look for what multiplies. 2 times 18 multiplies to 36 and adds to 15. Well, I've done this a few times, so I would say 12 times 3, but you might have to go 4 times 9. You might have to try some things out. 12 plus 3 is 15. I'm going to put x's on those guys. So if I were doing the product sum table, I would have a 2x squared plus 12x plus 3x plus 18. And then group those guys 2 and 2. If you prefer to do it that way, please do so. You will get the same answer, 2x plus 3 and x plus 6. The next lesson, I'll show you another method that you might like better. It's kind of more like guess and check, but way more organized than this mess. So I left 2 of them blank. It wouldn't hurt you to go and try those, but I'm going to give you a practice problem. When using the product sum table method, you're finding the product and sum of what parts of the problem. And I'd also like to ask which method you prefer so far. I really do want to know that. Remember, I'm looking for these things. I want to know where you're at. And here's your practice problem. Somewhere. There it is. Factor x squared minus x minus 12. If you like the product sum table for this, let's make sure you know what a, b, and c are. A is the number out in front of the x squared term. That's a 1. What about the number out in front of the x? Everybody sees that it's a -1, right? And then our c value, -12. So if you're doing a product sum table, use those. If you're going to do guess and check, you're just going to have your 2 parentheses. So you're going to put in the first spot for each parenthesis what multiplies to x squared. Second spot for the parentheses what multiplies to -12. And then check to make sure you get a -1x for your middle term. All right, everybody, have a great day. We'll see ya and talk about these, do more practice.